Hello, today I'm gonna talk about this audio controller by Musicom. It's a EFX-LE. This is their version 2, I guess, or Mark 2, whatever you want to call it. And also the Neunaber Illumine, I guess that's how you say it, new reverb. And the Midi functions tied together with this. Okay, I'll talk about the pedal board that you see here, what it is, the effects that I have, how they're ran, and then we'll jump to how to do a preset walkthrough on this, how to build a preset, and then how I have this set up, controlling the reverb through Midi, and how I use this as a controller to jump back, turn this on and off, basically a bypass using the foot switches here. There's two different features that's built into this that you can use, and I'll talk about how I have this set up and how I'm using both features. Okay, so we'll talk about how I have this ran. This pedal board ran as far as what's routed to what, and then I'll try to do some demos later on at the end of this video at a lower volume because it's late at night and I just wanted to get this out. I've done like 3 versions of this video, and I'm trying to condense it down. I've learned some things as I went along as I was doing this video, trying to get it to where I get all the content covered and then uploaded to YouTube. So I've learned a couple of things and I wanted to try to condense this down. It's late here, but I think I can get this condensed and shortened to get all the information out that I want to get out about this controller, and just how I have everything set up. And hopefully those of you that are viewing will get some useful information from this, because there's not too many videos on these MusicomLab controllers. There are some out there and they're great. The uploaders that have, and content creators that have created, you know, some tutorials for this did a great job. But I want to touch on some things that we're kind of missing. So first things first, we'll talk about the chain that I have going on here, okay, and what the pedal board is. So the pedal board is a Rockboard Sync. I think it's a 5.2. It's one of their pretty big size boards. As you can see, there's some pretty big pedals on here. And then I have the Mod 2 or Mod 1 junction unit that's built in. Well, it's not built in, but it's the drop in for it. There's 2 screws that hold it in, and it's hooked up. Otherwise, I'd flip this up and show you. Maybe I can get some pictures in this video, but you got ports out to run junction, basically a junction box to run all your cables through, so there's no running into the actual pedals themselves. So the first cable you can see, I'll try to point my finger to it, that's my guitar goes into, so that's guitar input. This is the guitar out, and then next to that, that's hidden that you can't see, is the effects send. And then right after that's the effects return, okay, cable. And then down here I have an IEC, that's just one that plugs in to basically power this and turn it on. I'm using 3 power supplies over here in the corner underneath the board. Mounted up there is a pedal power 3, and then there's smaller pedal power, I think it's the X4. It's a little tiny box that's jumpered from one of the DC outs that powers it, kind of daisy chain off of it. And then in the middle here I have a True Tone CS7 power supply, and that's powering the reverb, the Bella Pop Deluxe delay, and the looper. And then everything else that is powered on the board is through the Voodoo Lab, the pedal power 3, and then the X4 that's in the corner. So how I have this ran is the input jumps. So when I plug my guitar into the input, it's coming straight into the input of the Polytune and then the out from the polytune is coming into the decimator in. This is a G string, decimator 2 G string, so it has an in and an out, so guitar in, guitar out, and then a decimator in and a decimator out. I'm not using this the traditional way, where you would run this in the effects loop. I'm just using the signal input of the G string, so my guitar signal goes in and the noise gate sees that as clean as can be. I mean, it's running into this tuner, but it's not running into anything else, so the noise gate sees as much as my signal, clean signal as possible before, and then the gate after. So that's essentially what you want. You want a noise gate to see your unaltered guitar signal before it starts cutting the noise. So all the noise you put after it, that's when you want it to bring the noise floor down. So the out is going to the guitar in on this, and then the guitar out is coming to this Crybaby Mini down here, and then the out of the Crybaby Mini is going to the input of this controller. So out to in, and then from the guitar out to the wah Crybaby Mini, and then from the out of the Crybaby Mini to the input of the controller. The pedals I have that are in individual loops, and I'll get into what the numbers are, but it doesn't really matter if you're running this, how you have this configured, because you can change them in the controller. So you can change the order, however you want the pedals ran in the controller itself, which is really neat. So I have this overdrive right here is a Castlevania by Gremlin pedals. It's more or less like a JCM 800 Marshall style overdrive. It's not really a tube screamer, anything like that. It's more of an overdrive type of preamp box. So it's really great for blending in with other gain pedals. So this is in one of the loops in the controller. This max on overdrive is in one of the loops. The EQ is in the loop. This modified overdrive is in the loop here. And then the diesel VH42 is in the loop. Okay, so everything in this plugged in the loop of a controller is the diesel, the max-ons, EQ in the overdrive, the modified overdrive, and then the Castlevaniac. So what I have the out of this controller running into, so the output from the left output, because I'm just running mono, is coming into the Berserker overdrive, and then going into the Black Star metal, the HT metal, and then it's running into the decimator in. So this out is coming into the decimator in, and then it's going the out from the decimator out, or from the G string decimator out, is going to the guitar out to the amp. Okay, so that's how I have the guitar signal as far as what's routed here, and then going into the front end of the amp. So after the decimator, it runs straight into the front of the amp. These are in the effects loop, so these are ran in the effects loop of my amps. So you got the send coming to the input of the Bellapock Deluxe, and then the output of the Bellapock Deluxe is coming to the input of the reverb, and then the output of the reverb is coming to the input of this looper by TC Electronics, their newer version of their tiny looper, and then the output is running to the return, so that goes to the return of the amp. So if you were looking at this, these are basically chained. So send from the input to the send, and then from the output to the return of this looper. That's first and last in the chain of the effects loop on the amp. So not effects loop on here. These are in the effects loop of my amp. And that brings me to why I wanted to run and wanted to use a controller unit, so that, especially with this, I got these around the same time. I got this, and then I was like, well, now that I have this, and I have this has Midi, this Midi capable, I need something that, I wanted to set this up to where I can make presets with, this pedal, the overdrive, stacking them, these sounds with different modulation, and you get the idea, different mixtures. But I wanted to turn this on and off because it stays in the effects loop on. So as you see on the preset I have right now, it's on. But since it's in the effects loop and not running in one of these loops, having the MIDI feature is really useful. Because normally if you just ran this in the loop, you can turn that on and off. So you could leave this on in whatever loop you have. You could program it to where you know, it's on, but you still be limited to using these. So the Midi feature is really neat and really useful as far as assigning a preset and then also calling it on at, you know, when you need to according to the preset, and we'll get into that. So first thing, we'll talk about the controller now that we've got that out of the way. And by the way, the rock board is it didn't come with these handles. I installed them. You can get them on Amazon. They're actually made for this type of channeled aluminum. You see these on 3D printing machines. They build as the guides for the parts. I believe it's called aluminum extrusion, if I'm saying that right. And if you look for handles for aluminum extrusion, these should pop up like on Amazon. They come with bolts, the screws. I believe it was I think a little bigger than 1/4, but you can take the screw and then find the drill bit. I started small and just basically aligned them. And then I also got this with a case. It's a big ABS plastic style case, really huge. I may get that changed out later on to one that's smaller, maybe one of the new Fender Tweed cases. But these handles are great, especially this thing weighs a lot. I can grab it here instead of grabbing it somewhere else. So and if you had different pedal size, you could also mount them here on the board, on top of the board. You could punch holes, drill holes on the top, mount them there instead. I mounted them on the side because it's easier to grab, and it still fits in the case that I have. And I believe this would fit in the largest Fender case as well. Okay, so enough about the pedal board, enough about how it's ran. Hopefully you get the idea how I'm running this up and how I have this running as I've explained it. So when you get this controller, you'll get a manual like this, and it's not the entire manual, it's just a few pages from it. But we'll look at the pages that are kind of the most important as far as getting set up and getting so you got your initial power up on that page, but how to get it set up as far as the preset. So I'm going to walk through how to basically set up a preset on here with the pedals. Okay, so if we look at this page 1, or this page, I'm sorry, it's not page 1, it's like page 7 in the manual. It has page 2, page 3, and page 4, and then on the previous page you got your page 1 that it talks about. And all you really need to know about page 1, and when I talk about page numbers right here, this button or this foot switch, as you select the pages, you'll see there in the corner, the right hand corner, hopefully you can see it, it's changing the pages. And then also here you see a 3 and then a 1. So we're on preset 1, which is this number. The bank number is up here, and then this is your page number that you're on, so it changes as a page. Okay, so when you're on page 1, these are your preset as far as the switches. So this is actually what they do. So when you're on page 1, you're basically controlling your presets. Okay, so you got preset 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you have a tap tempo over here as the 5th one. Then you got your page up, which is here, and then your banks, bank up, bank down, and bank up over here. So when you're on page 1, that's basically how you scroll through your presets. Okay, when you want to edit your presets, oh, and also let me mention that's when you're on bank 1, that's a preset. Then you also have your global setting. Okay, so a global, and I'll get to that in a second. That's for my purposes, the global is a bypass, but there's also a lot of programming you could do for that, because it's basically a preset in its own. It's just a global preset, so it's all across your presets. So every time you go to global from preset, it's however you set it up, that's what it's going to be. And you see that light turning on and off. We'll get to that in a second. So if we go to page 2, that's where we would control our loops. So we'll start off on the bank 1. We'll get out of global, we'll go to the preset, and we'll go to page 2. And if you look at page 2 on here, I have this is lit up. This is lit up on the controller right now because I have this is the loop 3, and they're numbered. So it's lit up because I have loop 3 on. So if I wanted to put loop 1 on, which is the diesel, it would light up and then it would show you that that's on. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. When you're on page 2, these are, well, however, whatever you have in your loops. See, I only have 5 loops because there's only 5 pedals here that are assigned to a loop in here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is my 5th one. It stops. If you have a volume loop or you're using 6, which I believe is a stereo loop, then you could program 6. And for these purposes and how this is set up, there's 5. So I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 1, 2. I have this assigned as 3. This is 4, and this is in the 5th loop. Okay, and I just ran that way because I'm using forget the name of the Bestronix. So I'm using Bestronix cable, and then I'm using a monorail. In some of the connectors, I'm using the monorail wire, and then the rest of it is the Bestronix cable. And I'll try to get the description of what type of cable it is. I can't recall it at this time. It's kind of a thin style cable. And then the monorail is just a maroon. I got it in maroon. And I only ran these, not to get off on a tangent, but I only ran that because on some of these are all solderless connectors. Just because the connectors I had that I bought from Bestronix, the square plugs were great. The other plugs that I was going to use, they protruded out, and I didn't want the wire bending, even though they kind of have a solid connection. I'm using some of those in the junction box that go to in as a soldered connection. Up here at the controller, I'm using these. Okay, so these are in the loop here. Got off on a tangent here. Let's get back to what we were talking about. So preset, that's how you change it. Right here is lit up on page 2. If you want to save that, whatever you change, so let's just add the diesel to here. We're going to hold this down and it'll say storing, and then you're good to go. Then it's saved for that specific preset. But it'll always take you back to the page 1, so you'll have to scroll back through once you're done saving. So if we come back to page 2, let's take off the 1 and save that, because this is my clean preset that I'm using. So it's just this on and then one of the reverb effects. So the other things I have on here is, if we go to page 3, that's how we control the outputs, and then also if you're running a foot switch, and then the input buffer. So right now, if we go to page 3, I have the input buffer on, and you can see it's lit up by switch 5, which is the input buffer. Hopefully you can read that down here. So that's switch 5, and then I have the first one as the output left, because I'm just running mono. That's why it's that way. Okay, we go to page 4. Now we have a removable buffer. So if you look down at the board, this is lit on switch 1. That's because I have the movable buffer on. And as soon as I'm done explaining this, we're going to jump to how we rearrange these, because the controller allows you to rearrange each of the pedals. And like I explained before, it doesn't really matter how you hook them up. I ran them this way because I was using, like I said, these solderless cables here, and I just wanted the runs to have the least amount of stress on them as they made turns and whatnot. If I used the bigger, larger connectors down here, they would have had some stress where they ran into the pedals. So I wanted to keep all this tidy and have all the connectors have kind of free flowing, so they weren't bent and angled in any way down here, and they kind of just flowed with where I had them traveling. So I had the freedom of using the cable. You can buy it. You buy it in rolls. So I bought the Guy's Note, the monorail cables. I forgot how many feet, but I only use those. They're only used like on this run. But all these connections, with the exception of this one up here, and I think this one down here on the pedals, they're all soldered with the square plugs. And then of course I think there's a few up here that are jumpering the cables, and those are with the monorail. But even the monorail that I'm still using on these runs are soldered to the square plugs. So right here at the junction box, because I can, if there's an issue with these, I can always cut them and kind of redo them. I left a little bit of slack in there. So not to get off on a tangent, but it doesn't matter how you run these because you can change the order. So we'll get into that in just a second. If we go down to page 4, like I tell, yeah, the movable buffer, and then we're not going to worry too much about these. These are just if you want to decrease the volume and increase the volume of, I guess, different parameters on the loops and stuff. And then, of course, you set BPM. I'm not going to touch too much on that. When I find more about where I would use it, I would explain it. But I'm not using it with this setup. Not to say you couldn't. I'm just sorry not using that particular function, so we're not going to discuss that in the video. Okay, so you can see on page 4 I have this. This is the movable buffer, so it's on, and that's all on most of my presets. Okay, so pretty straightforward how to set these up. You basically go to page 2, select which loops you want on, whatever you have tied in the loops, and that's it. Once you get them on, then you can come to the order, which we're gonna go to now. So when you're on page 1, this is how you get basically to the menu. Just make sure you're on page 1, and you're gonna hit page and then the bank up. And sometimes it works and sometimes it's tricky. Okay, there we go. So now we're on the menu, so to speak, on this. Select menu. And what we want to do is we want to go to the presets, and then we want to go to routing. We're going to hit enter, and then you'll see this come up. It looks a little intimidating. It was for me at first, and I was like, until I was like, oh, okay, I know. 'Cause I only looked at the manual for certain things, and I'm kind of a hands-on. Let me go through it. If I screw something up, hopefully it's got a reset button, and I can put it back to factory specs, right? That's how we all are. At least that's how I am anyway. So it was a little intimidating seeing these, but it's pretty straightforward. You got your input, which is the I, and then all these numbers are associated with your loop. Okay, so your loop numbers. So as long as you know what you have in the loops, this is easy. And then how you change it is you just use these to scroll around. I know it's kind of hard to see, but there's a little blinking cursor down there at the bottom of the numbers. And you basically just run it over and then use these 2 blue. So you got left and right, okay, arrows going that way to move. So these orange buttons down here for switch 1 and 2, they let you move the cursor to the position. And it really doesn't matter because I think you can use these the actual moving arrows, which are the blue, to switch these numbers around. So say I wanted to move this 5 to the 2, I would just hit that button and you saw it move the 5 to the 2. If I wanted to reverse it, I just do the exact opposite, okay? And that's how you kind of shuffle them down in the order. If you look at this one, how I have this set up, and this is on most of my presets, it's running into 2, which is the max on. The 5 is this overdrive. The 3 is the equalizer, the max on EQ. And then 4 is this overdrive over here. And then 1 is the diesel VH4 2. And then the volume, I don't have anything in my volume loop, so that's just there on. But if you had something in there, you could actually move your volume loop wherever you want it, okay? Kind of use it as a boost, so you could use that and gauge it and probably use it as a boost after all your pedals. And then you have the movable buffer at the end, and I set that up because there's an input buffer, and then you have basically a movable buffer that's at the end of this, so it gets buffered before it comes to here, essentially, and then so it's buffered before it leaves and hits these other pedals. And then because this is the last one, this actually has a buffer in it too. So, you know, I think I got the buffer's kind of covered, at least for this purposes anyway. I could always run another one at the end better, but this has really good buffer built in from what I've noticed playing. It's definitely a different sound for the better that I've heard since I've been using this with this connected, because at one time I had all these connected without this in some shape or form, and this is by far, it sounds totally different for the better. Okay, so it's got great buffers built in. Whatever they did in this, they did it right. Okay, so if we want to save it, let's just move these two around. Let's just switch the 5 and the 2. So now the 5's there. So now the input is running into the overdrive, and then it's running into the max on. So before we had it running into the max on and into the MXR, it's basically swapped. So if we want to save it, we just hit this button and it'll say processing. Once it's done, it's saved. Okay, then you can hit this button and we'll exit out, and I'll show you that in a second. I'm just gonna reverse what I did here and put the 2 back here, and then we're gonna save it and just exit back out of the menu. Okay, so that's how you change the order, and it's order specific. So, or I'm sorry, it's preset specific. So whatever preset you're on, when we go here back to routing, let's just go back to routing to show you. You'll see it says preset, and it'll leave. If you want to just check, you just hit this back button and it'll show you what preset you're on. Okay, but it's preset specific. So if you want to change the routing, it's best to go to the preset. As long as you're on page 1, you can come to the menu, hit these 2 buttons, and then you can scroll down and get to your to the presets where you would alter the routing. Okay, so now that we're in this menu and we're on preset 1, and this what I'm about to explain for the MIDI, it's not really specific. You can change it, and I'm going to show you in just a second. You just want to get to the menu. Okay, so we're since we're in here, let's exit out. And the first things first on this, because I'm running, I don't think I talked about this, but this is the output of the controller, and it's running to the input of the reverb pedal. Okay, as far as MIDI, so MIDI out to in. If you ran it the other way, this would become a controller. Okay, so you'd be stepping on these pedals and they would be changing stuff inside this. Okay, so I don't understand why you'd use this as a controller. Well, maybe there is a purpose out there if you're chaining some and they didn't have a function. Say if you had like a H9 by Eventide or some other Strymon or something, and it didn't have the feature to control like these 2 switches, which most of them do. But let's say you didn't and you needed some control from here. You could use this as a controller, from what I understand. I'm not using it that way. This is the controller. That's what we want. So we're going out to in. Okay, so there's no really settings on this that I changed as far as the global setup. Just make sure you're on MIDI channel 1, and I have it set MIDI channel 1 on here. It's set to controller, but I could probably set this to through, and it wouldn't matter because we're not using the out on this. And then expression, we're not using an expression pedal for any control change messages. And then all the settings are just basically how you want this set up for your application. Okay, so with that being said, I'm on the pedal. We're gonna go to global first thing on here, and we're gonna select enter. And what we want to do is this PC offset is basically where this starts. So on this pedal specifically, your Illuminate Me is the first preset in this pedal. Okay, so it starts at 0. If you were to set this at 1, these would be off, so they wouldn't be in sync. So this would be registering the Illuminate Me, which is setting 0, would be showing up as 1. So we make sure this is 0. And if you're running another pedal, you would do the same thing. You would just make sure whatever it's running at, and its first is the offset. So as you scroll through the presets, they're the same. It's not really, from what I saw, I mean, it'll change with it, so it'll just rename them, but they'll definitely be off. But it'll still work the same. So that's just one of the things to change in this menu. I don't know what this stuff means, so I'm not going to get into that. If you're watching the video and you know what it means, go ahead, by all means, leave a comment and explain to me what the MV and the FB is. This is what I understand for like tap tempo or something, which I'm not using. And the same with the time clock. So here at the MIDI out, though, is what we want to make sure this is set to out and not through, because we are using the out going to the in on this, and that we're on channel 1. Okay, and this is for global settings. So this is when you go back to the global, because I imagine if you want to use your global with something else, that's maybe the through, that's when you would go in and change this. But our global is running off this, so that's what we want it in sync with, okay? Because our global setting is going to be with this guy. If we had like a H9 or a Strymon or something, and something else with MIDI, and we wanted that as the global setting, then we would set this up accordingly, okay? So we'll exit back out. Went over, I had gone over that, just wanted to touch on that before I move on to the actual MIDI setup, okay? So now that that's covered, and we have how we arranged the loop, and we made a loop, so we have this on as our preset 1. Now we want to turn this on, and these are all presets, so I'm going to walk you through, but these are I've already set this up, okay? Make it go faster, and I'm going to do the movements and everything as I would, and maybe we'll flip something around. But I want to walk this through because this is a lot of information to cover. It's going to be a long video, and I know we all are going to be like, man, this guy's talking. And a lot of information, but I want to explain it the best way I can so you understand. Those of you that are viewing understand without going too fast and skipping something. Okay, so now that we're at the main menu, we want to go to presets, and then we want to go to MIDI volume. It doesn't really matter what preset you're on when you get here, as long as you're on page 1 from the menu, okay? So as long as the little box over here is on page 1, whatever preset, you will always be able to get to this menu by hitting the page and the scroll up, okay? And then if you're changing this, what we're going to do is change the MIDI messages, and this, what we're doing right now is changing MIDI messages, okay? We want to make a control message, and we want to make a program change. A control change and a program change. So we want to do both because this is capable of doing 12, okay? 12 per preset. So we want this to turn on, and we want it to go to the preset we want for a preset, okay? So we're going to start on 1. Well, we want this to call back. We want it to call on the actual preset, but we also want to call this up and turn this on, okay? And I'll get to explain why in just a second. So it doesn't really matter when you pull this menu up because you can change the preset with the arrow. You saw this changed, this number. So, oh, I went back. Let me go back and hit enter. Enter. Oh, enter. Okay, so you can call these up with the bank up and down over here. You can call these up. So now that we are here, okay, we started on a preset 1, we can scroll through. So let's go to global first off, and I'll start and I'll go through the rest of the presets. In my application, I'm using the global as a bypass, okay? A bypass meaning that every one of these presets, you step on this foot switch again, and then it goes back to global. And that's the way this is set up from the factory, from what I understand. You can change it. I'm not going to go in that today, but I will talk about how you change a function on a switch. But you can change the functions on these switches and what they do, and whether or not they go back to global setting or whatever you want them to do. So you can put up to 4 MIDI messages in just the switch, okay? But I'm going to make a note, and I'll talk about it more when I explain that function later on, is that if you do create MIDI functions in this switch, they will override whatever presets you make, okay, for the actual preset. So if you make a preset in here, and then say you make a global setting, and you want that global setting to do and go back and forth, if you assign this switch, this foot switch, a different function with the 4 MIDI messages, those 4 MIDI messages or whatever you assign the switch to do, it will override your presets, okay? At least that's what I understood, and that's what I gathered from playing around with this. So, let me get my water. So, now that we're in the global setting, you see up here we got MIDI 1, the CC, the C, and then there's 1, and then we have, I know it's kind of hard to see, but it's an 80, okay? This right here specifies whether you're on a preset, and our setting right now, it's in the global, so it's GLB, so it's a global. Okay, this MIDI is your MIDI messages. And like I told you, you can set up to 12 MIDI messages. And then there's other functions, and I won't get into those either, but you can actually change the volume for the preset as well. But if you scroll up, you can see we have 12 MIDI messages. And then it goes to XPDL. I don't know what that is either, so I'm not going to get into that. It's another type of MIDI that I don't think that does anyway. Okay, so we'll go to MIDI message 1. And as you can see, I have a control change, so I have a CC. We're on channel 1, because we're on channel 1 for here. And then we're on number 080. So the 080 was pulled off of Neunaber's manual for the reverb, for this reverb pedal. And then the engage, disengage, the value of that, well, basically the change number was 80. And that's gonna allow you to engage the pedal or disengage the pedal, okay, as a MIDI message. If we come over here to the next, where it's a value, you have a range from 0 to 63 is going to disengage the pedal, and from 64 to 127 is gonna engage the pedal. Okay, so right now we're on 0, right? So we're disengaging the pedal, and this is on the global setting. So if you wanna change these numbers, you'll change it. And then you can hit enter and save, and it will change it'll save your settings. So we'll change this one just so I can show you what it looks like. So we change the value. It's still going to disengage because, like I said, it's a value from 0 to 63. But we want to save that, so we're going to hit this button, and it's going to say processing, okay? And it's going to save. And I'll show you that it doesn't matter whether it's 0, because I had it on 0 and I know it worked. And we'll keep it on 1, and then I'll plug in the amp later on in the video, and then we'll verify that it does indeed. And actually we can check it now if we scroll out of here to verify that it works. So if I'm in a preset mode right now and I go back to global, you can see it turned off. Okay, so we'll go back to our presets in our menu, and now we're going to go up to our preset. Okay, and this is where it gets a little more information to put in, but we're only doing 2 MIDI messages. So we're on preset 1, which is here, and like I showed you before, we have this on, but nothing else. So there's no other pedals on but this one. And now we want a reverb sound, or one of the presets on the reverb pedal to come on. So, and we want to do it via MIDI. Okay, so in that we're doing 2 messages. What we want is we want this to come on, and then we want to change whatever preset and assign it and save it to that preset. So every time we engage this preset, it turns on and it goes to the preset value that we save and program in here. So as you can see, the first MIDI message I have is a control change message. Okay, and we're still on channel 1, but this is the first message, and it's the same 080 number, because like I said, we got that from the manual. We're going to come over here, and now our value is 126 because we want to turn this on. Okay, we want to turn on the pedal for this message. So when we save this preset, we want it to come on. Okay, so first thing, CC, control change, so that it comes on. So if I come back up here, now we go to MIDI message 2. Now this MIDI message 2 is a program change. So we want to control this. Okay, that's why we have a PC message. Okay, program change. We're still on channel 1. Now if we come over here, this is 0. Okay, so I'm going to scroll over to where it's numbered. And we're going to scroll up. And if you watch the reverb pedal, it's going to change. Okay, so now we can use this to scroll through and find the preset that we want. Okay, so let's say we wanted studio room. We're good with that. We already programmed our first message, which is a control change, so it's going to come on. Okay, and then now we just set our program change and the channel, and then we're on preset 4, so we're on preset 4 on this. If we come over here, I don't know what these mean, so I'm not going to explain that either. Maybe one of you viewers out here can put that in the comments what the MB and LB is. What I understand is their values for range. There's no really range on here, and it works the same whether I turn these off or leave these at 0 or whatever, for just basically turning on for the 2 MIDI messages. So I'm not going to get into those, but if one of you wants to explain that, feel free. But I'm not going to explain that because I don't know what it is. But it doesn't really matter what you set that at, because like I said, this works just fine with leaving them at 0. All we want is to save the preset, and we want the channel and the program change to talk to the reverb pedal. Okay, so once we got them saved, put that as studio room, we're just gonna hit this button again, and it's gonna save it. Okay, now we exit out. Now if we go to global, it turns it off because we set the control change to turn it off, okay, to turn off the pedal or to disengage. And now we're going to call it up with our preset to turn it back on with the control change that we set, and then also the program change that we set. So we programmed it, did a program change to come to preset 4, okay, and then we did a control change with the code, the number to 080, the control change number, and then the 126 to call it back on. Okay, so 64 to 127 is on this particular pedal. 0 to 63 is off. Okay, so the global has a control change code 80, but it's set on 1. It was on 0, we changed it to 1, and then on our preset value we did it 126. Okay, and it could be 127, whatever number, it doesn't matter. I just left it at 126. So if we go back over here to presets, the MIDI volume, and come back over here to the control change, it's 1 on this for the global. If we exit out, or I'm sorry, if we go back, let's scroll up to our preset 1 and scroll over here, it's 126. It can be any number. We'll leave it at 126 because that comes on, but you could probably put it in any range. I don't think it matters, because like I said, it's a range that it's engaging that and turning it back on. So we'll exit out, and now we're on our preset. As you can see, when we go to global, it cuts it off. When we click on our preset, it turns it back on, it goes to studio room. If we want to verify that, and I'll show you that this is another preset that I have, wet plugin. Okay, I go to global, it's set up the same exact way. Okay, so if we kick that back on, our wet plugin, and it turned the pedal on. So when we're on our preset, go to global, it turns the pedal off. Okay, and when we come to our preset, which is a wet plugin, it turns it back on. Okay, I have this preset 4. Let's go here so I can show you. So we go back to the menu, we're on our preset, go to presets, go to MIDI volume, and we'll come up to channel preset 4, I'm sorry. And you see I got a control change message in there with the same 080 control change number, and I have the value at 0. Okay, it doesn't matter, it could be 0 to 63, but I have it to where this turns off. On this particular preset that I have, it turns off the reverb no matter what. Okay, and I have that for a specific reason, so that if I'm using these 3, I don't have to go back to global to cut it off. This preset will do it for me. It'll control the MIDI, and it'll shut off the reverb and just turn on whatever other pedals I want. Okay, so we'll exit out. Now that I've showed you that, we'll come over here, cut up our preset 1, the reverb pedal's on. If we go over to 4, it turned it off. And now if you look, I just have 1 and 2. So that's this pedal and this pedal that are on. And that's it. If we wanted to call back now without going to a preset, let's say we want to call and turn this back on. Well, the cool thing about this pedal is that, or this controller, is that, like I talked about earlier, is you can assign any one of these foot switches to do a function, multiple functions. So let's go take a look at that. We'll come back to preset 1 just because I want to be on that preset for now. We'll go back to our menu. So we're going to scroll down to where we get to switches, and then we're going to go into that menu. And you'll see it's got a page 1 and then a switch. So out of your pages, Let's go to the end. You have 6 pages. I don't see 6 in here, but maybe there is, and they're combinations. I haven't got that far yet, but there's 6. If you're using song set modes or something like that, I could see where that maybe would come in to play, where they would be assigned different things. That's a lot of information to store in your noggin. So we'll cover just this simple one that I programmed to this, and then you can go from there, but you have the know-how of how to set this. So we're on page 1. So anytime we're on page 1, that's basically when we're selecting our presets, okay? So keep that in mind. You set the page 1, it's these switches, and they control presets. So if we look back over here on our page 1, what does the page 1 do? Okay, it controls the preset 1, 2, 3, 4, your tap tempo, which is here, okay, and then the bank up and down and the page up. So your bank up and down and then your page, okay, and then that has a multi-function of page, and then if you hold this button down, it'll mute it while you're in page 1, and I'll show that in a little while. If you have a tuner, you can have a mute here, so I'm not going to use that mute there. Okay, so we want to do on page 1. If you did it on page 2, you could assign a switch on page 2, but if you see, those have other functions. So why would you want to change those? Maybe on a song set mode, that would be useful. It's not useful for my purposes. So what I did is I assigned this tap tempo because I'm not using that as I programmed it for a MIDI message. So let's take a look at that. So I'm on page 1. Let's get to our switch 5. Excuse me. So if you look at our switch 5, you have tap tempo, and up above that's a switch type. So let's go over to switch type, and you see we got MIDI 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, and then we have some other stuff, so we can change the LED color on it, which is pretty neat. I thought I changed that earlier, but let's see if we can change it to purple or something for it. Then let's go back up. To our MIDI 1, and you can see right here I have a control change message, okay? Same one we looked at earlier, CC 080, and if we scroll over, now it has this NV and the FV. I don't know what those are either, but I will tell you that this is the one that you want to put the value in, okay? So if you were using this as a call up, turn this on or off, those numbers would be over here. So we're calling it on, so it's like I said, 64 to 127. If you wanted to shut this off, it would be 0 to 63. That number's here, and I just set this to off. How I know that is because I played around with them, and it only worked when I set it up this way. Okay, what you're looking at. I hope you can see that. It's MIDI 1 as our first message, only message, and then the NV you see here is off, and the FV is this 126. Okay. So if we exit back out of here, it'll ask us if we want to save this. Let's say yes, because I changed it to purple. And I don't know if it's going to change that, but I guess it didn't. Maybe it will if we change it. So we'll exit out. Oop, went too far. And now we're on bank 1, and this is on. So if we come back over to 4, remember I saved that preset 4 to the CC message to cut the pedal off, okay, to turn this off. So if we see it's off, let's say we're on this, we're in global, it also turns it off, okay? But say we're on the preset and we want to call up maybe the last setting that we're on. So say I was over here on the studio room, okay, or the wet plugin. Let's just say I was on the wet plugin, and I come over here to 4, which is my gain sound, and I want to turn that on, right? Well, it turned this off. But say I want to get back to the wet plugin, and it was all the way over here. In this case, it's only right here, but I'm right next to this foot switch. Well, now I can just kick it on, and now I'm in the preset mode, and it's on. So say I wanted the gain with this on, it's on. or if I want to global, remember I said global, the presets, they override, and they would on any switch. So even if you program, that switch is going to override, even though that we're in global right now, and it turned off. If I want to call it back, it'll still call it back on. Okay, so we programmed this switch to call back and turn this on. It'll override the presets, and it'll specifically override the preset that you're actually on. So if you set this, so if I set this over here, you will not be able to use a global to bypass, okay, as a preset for the MIDI function, because the switches, there must be first in the programming, so they are kind of hardwired to what you set them at to override any of the other software. That's my guess. I don't know. That's just how it worked out for my application, so just keep that in mind. But that's a useful feature, to assign a foot switch to call back up and turn that on. If we want to bypass it, you know, I have this program to bypass this on this particular setting. Like I said, its bypass is set. Once I go to this preset, it'll bypass and turn this off. Okay, so it bypasses it. But if I wanted to call it back up in the global without these effects on, so remember my global setting is dry, so it cuts this off and bypasses the reverb, and then there's also nothing else on. But you could set it up however you want. You could set it up to you could set your global or a bypass to turn anything on. It has the same amount of MIDI messages as a preset, so you can set it up however you want. It's just in this application, what works for me is to set the global as a bypass, so bypass everything. But then I wanted a way to call it back. So if I'm on global and say I wanted one of these reverbs on, I can still turn it on and stay in global, and this effect will still come back on. Okay, so that's how I'm using the board, and that's what works best for my application. And as you can see, with this in, I can come over here. Let's go back to preset 1, where it's a studio room. I could change these, and nothing changes on here, but it will change on here while it's on. Okay, and I'll show you that in the when I turn on the amp. So if we're in here, it'll go right back to our preset where we were at. So let's save and come back and change the preset and go back to what I had on the, so we'll go to our MIDI message 2, which is our preset change, and let's put this back to the Illuminate Me preset, and we'll save it. Okay, and then we'll exit out. And now you'll see this is the wet plugin, and this is the Illuminate Me, and this setting is a King Gong. I have to turn these two on, or I'm sorry, these two, so the diesel and this graphic EQ, and it's a really cool synth type sound I found. Okay, so very cool, very useful controller, pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it. There's a lot of features. I haven't even gotten into the song set mode on this, but there's a lot of expansion as far as making this unique to whatever you have on your board. Okay, I'm sure this thing, if you had the distortion that Neunaber makes, that's MIDI programmable, you could even run that in with this, and that just would be amazing. In fact, I am going to replace one of these eventually with that. I can't think of the name of the pedal. It escapes my mind right now. But if you're familiar with Neunaber products, then you'll know what I'm talking about. It's their digital distortion that is MIDI programmable. And there's other MIDI programmable distortions and overdrives out there, but that one looks really promising. And like I said, I plan to replace one of these later on, and then also run it tied. Yeah, it will be in the loop, but it will also be changing the MIDI so that I can make presets with that via MIDI that come on. So once again, this thing is really expandable as far as and you can make it unique to your specific layout on your board. This is just how I have mine set up. To me, it made sense to have the global bypass, the reverb, and with the multiple MIDI messages, you could have that global bypass all your up to a certain amount of pedals if they were all on and you cut them all on. Okay, even if they're whether they're in the effects loop or in one of these loops. Okay, if they're changing the MIDI, you can control that in here, which is a really cool feature. Really great. As far as any lag or anything like that, I haven't noticed any since I've put this together. I'm using pretty decent cables. The connectors that come with the reverb are a stereo. I don't know if you can see, but they're like a 1A stereo, and then they turn into the female 5-pin MIDI. So at first I had bought, and I was using, these are like a 3-foot, I believe, Guitar Center MIDI. And then I ordered, this is like a 1-foot Amazon special MIDI cable. And I will tell you, I had these ran, I had this ran, and this actually froze on me when I was doing a demo of this video. And I've done 3 demos and trying to get this content put together today, and I haven't had an issue with any freezing going to this menu. This menu actually locked up when I had these together, but it could have been because I had before running the in, I was running the, so this is running the out to the in, and I was running the out to the in on here. So out, in, and then also this out running to the input, which is right here. So that could have been it too, but these cables, I'll try to leave a link in the description. These were cheap, and I don't notice any crazy noise, but it seems to work just fine, and it's short, so I don't have a long cable like this all tied up, because there's so many other cables underneath this that are tied. I didn't want anything else. If it breaks, it's cheap, and I have 3 other cables to put in its place. So I'm gonna turn on the amp. We're gonna exit back out of here, and I'm gonna turn on an amp, or on my amp, and I'm not gonna play very loud because it's late at night, but I'm gonna try to get it to where maybe you don't hear the pick. If you hear picking noises, hey, I'm sorry. I'll get some better demos later on. This is really just to show the noise of the presets as I scroll through them and how they change the channels more than a tone check. And also, I'm not the greatest guitar player, so just showing you how this controller works, and hopefully I'm in tune. The guitar I'm using, I'll try to get this in the over here in the camera. This is just a parts caster. This is a Tom Morello signature strap body. But then this is a roasted maple neck from a Squier Contemporary Floyd Rose setup guitar, and I just stuck it on there and then wired up my own pickups. These are Stonewall pickups, hand-wound pickups. I have an XFR bridge and then an old tone neck. They're both vintage voiced. 300K pots. That's all I had. This guitar is kind of a work in progress, but it works, and that's what I had laying around. So we're on the bridge, come up to the neck. is a lot more full-bodied. I'm only messing with the preset. I haven't edited any of these presets in here. Okay, so if we jump back over to, hopefully this isn't too loud, the gong, the king gong on the preset. So we're on Illuminate Me. And then if we bypass on the global, it turns it off. But if we want to call back up the reverb pedal, this is just the king gong setting with no distortion on. And if we scroll through here, we can actually change it still on the fly on the pedal if we wanted to, okay? So this is the diesel and the max on. So if we come back over, we wanted to turn that torn texture. Let's say we wanted to do, let's see if we can get to a echo over long tape. And we're on that setting. And then we can bypass that. So as you can see, there's no popping from going back and forth. Let's go to the bank 2. So this is the diesel and the modified overdrive. And I also have the noise gate on if you want to hear the noise. This is how much noise is in my signal, and it's mainly because of that pedal. So this does a pretty good job of gating the noise, but this is the diesel and the modified overdrive. And the mid boost, you can see the lights on it. If I were to take it off, it gets a little thinner sounding. Okay, so what you saw is me jumping from this preset. It's basically the diesel with the overdrive on this preset, and then on the previous one, like I said, it was the diesel and the modified overdrive. So hop back over. Okay, so go back over to bank 1 and then our preset 1. And that's as far as like the demo, as far as the sound that I wanted to talk about, because this is already a long video. Hopefully you get the idea. What's great about this is there's no popping, hitting the switches. They stay on, and then you toggle it through here. And there's also, let's see if I can show that before in the video. If you come to global and go into the settings and go to audio, you also actually have clickless, and you can set that for your outputs. So it's clickless. And then there's also a setting for the send and other ones as well. I have these on the outputs, so there's no noise, and it works really great. Let's see. I think I have about covered it all. So that's what I wanted to share. Like I said, and for these purposes on my board, the global turns this off and is a dry, but you can also set it to where you call back on each individual preset, and it'll turn on your MIDI function or your device. Turn it on and then cut it off. Hopefully I got some useful information out there. Like I said, the Illumine, the Reverb by Neunaber, the engage and disengage, it was a 080 for control change, and in their manual from 063 to 0 to 63 was the disengage, and then from 64 to 127 was the engage. Okay, doesn't matter what it's set at. You saw they all came on and they all worked just fine. How I had this set up, not a whole lot of noise either, especially on just the reverb. Once I had the gain pedals on, yes, it gets noisy, but reverb, no crazy noise that I heard or that I'm hearing. And this is actually sitting right next to the amp. The amp I was using was a Marshall 5210 with some kind of Celestion that came out of a Hughes and Kettner. I forgot the model. So it's not stock, and it's an 8 ohm. I think those came with like a G12 T100 stock. That's not the speaker, and it's something else. Still sounds great. It's basically a solid state version of a Marshall JCM 800. So I'll do some more reviews later on with different tones that I come up with and presets, and it'll solely be just demos on that, and they'll be quick. This is a long one because I want to explain this part of it, and then if I figure anything else out as I go along, I'll make shorter and shorter and shorter videos. Look at the only videos I got that are really long, but it's because I try to cover a lot of stuff, so somebody can, or for those of you that are viewing this, y'all can kind of scroll around and find the areas of what y'all want to actually watch, and then, you know, take the information you need and roll with it. Other than that, I hope you got something out of this video, and you can use it and it's beneficial in some way. Like, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. Until next time, and I do more with this, take care and be safe.